Welcome to another edition of the Mael Time podcast. I'm joined today by Yotam Cohen. His brother Nimrod Cohen was kidnapped on October 7th from his tank, and he is still held hostage by the Hamas terrorist organization. A lot has transpired since we last spoke a few weeks ago. Mainly, I believe you received a proof of life. Is that true?
We actually received many proof of lives, but we received major ones, including a visual proof of life in the last couple of weeks. So it
Right,
is
with the
big
tattoo,
news for
correct?
us. Correct, yeah.
What was going through your mind when you saw that?
Well, I mean, basically, we knew that this video was going to be posted. Just a week before, me and my dad spoke to one of the hostages, Yair Horn, who you see in the video. We met him in person in the hostage square, and we sat with him for about 20 minutes. And he told us some basically what happened in captivity and his testimony in captivity and how he and the other hostages, those who left and those who stayed there, were separated. So he told us these moments of being separated were filmed by Hamas, and it is supposed to be posted the next week. So I knew in the back of my mind that something like this could be posted, and we were basically ready for such a thing. But nonetheless, seeing this, we've got many sorts of life signs or proof of life of my brother, but this is the first time we see him with our own eyes. Like I said, first visual proof of life, and it's one thing to hear about something, and it's another thing to see it. We're very excited. I was the first one to see the video. I saw it on Telegram. It was, I think, a Saturday afternoon, just
So
before we were.
the first time you see it is on a Hamas Telegram.
Yeah, I think it was one of the Israeli channels.
Okay, who picked it up?
Someone who
Okay,
posted it. Yeah, I don't follow their channel, just the Israeli ones. And just before we were supposed to head out to one of the protests, Saturday night protest, and I saw the video and I immediately recognized my brother even before you see the tattoo. I said to myself, this is Nimrod. And then just a couple of seconds later, you can see the tattoo, which is a funny story. He actually got the tattoo just 3 days actually before being kidnapped. So I actually didn't get the chance to see it with my own eyes. He only texted me and we talked on the phone the week of the kidnapping. I think it was Tuesday. He said to me that he got the tattoo, and I just got to see it through a photo he sent to me on WhatsApp. But nonetheless, I recognized the tattoo and I showed it to my parents and my sister, and it was a breath of air for us. Yeah.
so I guess you go from that breath of air to, based on the comments of your father, and not such a breath of fresh air, with the resumption of a more active military campaign. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but your father, as I am quoting, I'm going to paraphrase from I-24, essentially said that Prime Minister Netanyahu betrayed the Israeli people and betrayed the hostage families by resuming the war and is conducting military operations solely for political reasons, not from any military or strategic reasons with the hostages. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, correct. I fully agree with this. We feel like the first hostage deal, the so-called first phase, was the best thing that happened to Israel in the past year and a half. After a year and a half, we finally there weren't any sirens. Soldiers weren't dying anymore. Hostages weren't dying anymore. Hostages were being reunited with their families. I think that the entirety of Israel was starting to heal. And I think people were starting to understand that the military campaign in Gaza simply goes nowhere. There is simply no more areas for the IDF to maneuver inside without hurting hostages, without hurting civilians. I think even I speak with people in the IDF who is now were in Gaza at this time. It feels like for the IDF, one hand is tied behind their backs, and there is no more space physically to operate in. And we felt like something good was happening. Hostages were coming back, and we were on the verge. When the first stage ended, we felt like we were on the verge of the second phase. And after we saw Hamas's announcement, which were confirmed by Israeli sources and I think some American sources, that Hamas is willing to release all the hostages in a single phase, both the living and the dead ones, if Israel will agree to sign and will agree for the term to end the war and start a long time, in the end, rehabilitation of Gaza and establishing a new regime, a new entity inside, governing entity inside Gaza. And I think the majority of people of the people of Israel felt like it's a good thing. And we saw that the deal collapsed because Israel refused to continue to the second phase, even though, and we know this for a fact, Israel agreed to the three-phase agreement. The agreement that Israel signed on the 20th of January included the three phases, and we only got the first phase because Israel basically violated, as far as we know, violated the hostage release deal and resumed the war.
So you're
One of the thing
I
and
just,
one of the
I
things
just want to
that
ask one thing
causes
here. You're
major
saying it's 100%. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
no and just to clarify one thing, one of the major things that causes such a mistrust between us as hostage family members and the government or the Israeli public and the government, that all those actions that I just said, violating the hostage deal, refusing to start negotiation on the 60th on the 16th
16,
day,
16. Yeah, right,
yeah,
right.
after 16 days, and withdrawing from Philadelphia corridor, starting to the withdrawal from the Philadelphia corridor on the 42nd day and finishing on the 50th day, and stopping the humanitarian aid and now resuming the war. Israel has violated it on many steps of the way, and no official Israeli source, no one in the government, not the prime minister, not the minister of defense, no other basically ministers or Knesset members, no one stood up to the public and explained why they are doing this. Everything is rumors, or we heard from the media. There is no transparency between the official Israel and us as families and us as public. And what we're seeing now in Gaza are military actions, same military action that took place a year and a half ago when we first entered Gaza. These are the exact same places with the exact same basically tactics and actions that killed hostages before, and we are very much afraid that they are going to kill hostages again.
Okay, listen, I definitely think of course, there's a real fear if in a battlefield that things don't go properly, and that would be absolutely horrendous. I do think there's a big difference in intelligence in terms of locations, and presumably Israel was monitoring things. I'm not trying to say that one way or the other in terms of how they're operating, but I do think that they have more intelligence now than they did in November of 2023. Correct? Like I'm assuming if they're able to put together where the releases were and where I'm sure they had drones in the air and things like that, right? So I don't know if that's a silver lining, but I'm just saying it's a little bit different than having no intel as they did in October 23, right? Or November 23. Just because you said it was the exact same, it's a little bit different.
I
But I'm
mean,
not.
yeah, technically you're correct. I can't argue with this, but you can
Okay,
tell
yeah.
this to the 41 hostages or the families of
No,
41 hostages who were
uh,
killed.
I well, first of all, I would never excuse like the whole October 7th and into it. I can't. I'm not the one who's gonna stand up and defend Yoav Galan or Herzl. I'm not gonna do that. Um, my the emphasis is very heavy on Israel's violation. Do you think Hamas also violated the ceasefire, or do you think that the ceasefire falling apart was mostly the fault of the Israeli government?
We know that there are minor violations on both sides. We saw that the basically political games that Hamas has been doing since the deal started, the so-called ceremonies inside Gaza, which were meant to shame and to humiliate Israel, were some kind of violations. What happened with the body of Shiri Bibas was a violation. There were some violations on the Hamas side, and were some minor violations on Israel's side, refusing to release prisoners and doing things to try to push the hostage deal. I don't say I justify Israel thing, and I don't condemn it. I think what they did, and they managed to end the first part of the deal, and I think it's justified basically. So I will say I justify Israel violation because they managed to finish the first phase of the hostage and release 38 hostages. Most of them were living hostages, which basically reunited with their families. And I think this is the most important thing. I'm not saying who is right and who violates more. Returning all the hostages is the most important. But for the time being, I think Israel has deliberately violated the hostage release deal, intentionally collapsed the hostage deal and resumed the military campaign inside Gaza for specific political interests, including getting Ben Gvir back into the government and putting forward the budget for 2025, for which Netanyahu, our prime minister, needed some votes for this, basically to expand the government and to pass the so-called recruitment bill for the ultra-Orthodox in Israel. And let's not say trying to resign the head of the Shin Bet Ronen Bar and the Attorney General Gali Barab Miara because he's under criminal basically trial
Well,
and
yeah,
they're ongoing.
put those two people in different categories. 'Cause I'm guessing that you, as a family member of someone who's been kidnapped and is still kidnapped, that you would want Ronan Bar to go home, right? That's a fair assumption. You're just not happy with the order of operations, correct?
I want
Yeah.
him to go home the same day that Bibi should go home. And because Herzl Levi has resigned, and like we spoke before, Gallant was
Right,
also
Gallant, right,
fired.
right, yeah, of course. Yeah.
I now afraid that Bibi is going to fire Ronen Bar and still stay in office. I believe
Now,
they all should go home the same day.
here's my question for you. Again, here I try to ask questions from alternative viewpoints to really push, because something that bothers me about the way that the media is doing is that very segmented, so you don't really get the cross questions in the same way. So how do
Yeah,
you
you
respond
know
to
you can
someone
ask freely whatever you want.
exactly? How do you respond to someone who says that they understand your position, why your position is as it's spoken as it is, due to the fact that your brother is in captivity, but they're very concerned that if Israel doesn't militarily occupy Gaza, or at least make sure that Hamas is completely removed, you have a group that has vowed to do October 7th again and again and again, sitting on your border, and you risk hundreds, if not thousands, of Israelis dying in the next couple of years, whether that's re-entering militarily or just from them shooting an anti-tank missile on at Route 232 or something like that. So how do you answer the crowd that's very worried about if they did go and do a full stage 2-3, that it's just leading to disaster?
So I think on the technical level, what you said is 100% true. I think it's a very a sound and firm worry for many Israelis, even those who protest against the government, and even those who protest or advocate for a hostage deal still have that concern in their mind, and I also have that concern. But at the same time, you have to consider some facts. The first one is that this government is the same government, basically this prime minister is the same one that has been prime minister for basically 15, for the past 15 years, the same one who's been giving Hamas basically millions of dollars monthly, which is the same dollars they use, the same money they use to build those tunnels and to acquire those weapons they used against us on the 7th of October. And it's the same prime minister and the same government who are managing the war right now, and by the way, are suspected to receive Qatari money on the ongoing Qatargate investigation. This is the first fact. The second fact to be considered is that in the past year and a half, while the IDF was maneuvering and did its military campaign inside Gaza, it wasn't able to eliminate Hamas. And we saw that in the past month and a half, Hamas has managed to recruit more militants and more terrorists, and his power and the amount of terrorists there are right now is basically the same one that was on the 7th of October. So Hamas was able to rehabilitate and rebuild himself. So basically, I'm not saying that the war was effortless or achieved nothing, but Hamas managed to rebuild himself to the same power, and we simply don't have another year and a half to fight against Hamas again. We don't have the resources, we don't have the soldiers to do it. Those who are advocate for it, for like, let's return to the war and finish Hamas. This is not. We're not talking about 2 days or 3 days, not even a week, not even a month, not even half a year. It took us a year and a half to get to where we are now, and it will take us multiple years to fully eliminate Hamas with military pressure, not mentioning the fact that all the living hostages, 24 in number right now, will be dead. What I believe is the best course of action to eliminate Hamas is diplomatically and financially. Hamas needs to be pushed out of its governing state inside Gaza. You need to eliminate funds. You need to eliminate its political power. You need to push forward another governing state. Hamas. There are those who are saying that Hamas is an ideology and you cannot be eliminated. I don't believe so. If the world managed to eliminate, or at least at that point of time, the Nazis, I think Hamas also can be eliminated. But just like we didn't, like the Europe and the US didn't kill all the Germans in Germany after the Second World War, we cannot simply eliminate all of Gaza. Hamas needs to be eradicated, and we saw it in the last year and a half. We simply are not able to do it with only military operations, and that's why I think that getting the second part of the deal, agreeing to end the war, and getting the help of the US, of the European Union, of the modern Muslim states, with Hamas agreements to put down his weapon and be pushed aside, allowing another governing state to be brought up inside Gaza. And I'm not so naive to believe there are going to be peace and love between the two people, but at least we can build something sustainable for a permanent solution to be made.
Yeah, so personally, I don't think it's remotely possible, because I don't think that Hamas, through just diplomatic talks and financial talks, will give up every living hostage. Because I think that they realize that they're getting pressured, and that's kind of their insurance policy, which is, it's obviously an insanely difficult conversation and concept, and I don't know what answers do I have. I don't have answers. I'm just looking. When I see it, I don't think that they would, knowing how high profile it is and how divisive it is in Israeli society, and painful. Like, where I disagree with you on this, like, I actually think that, I really do think that it bothers a lot of the people that you hate and think don't care. I really think it does bother them, but I don't think the answer is so. I just think that there's a reason why Yehia Sinwar, Yamach Shemo, did exactly what he did and pushed that, because he knew that that's a sensitive spot in Israeli society, and if you tug on it, it's really.
I just want to say something about what we just said about the fact that Hamas is not willing to release all the hostages and is going to keep some assets for the future. I've actually heard this argument from many politicians in Israel, left-wing politicians, and many of those who advocate for resuming the war. We've actually spoke to many high-ranking generals inside the IDF and many people in the Ministry of Defense and officials both in Israel and outside of Israel. And not one official source, not one. We spoke to the head of intelligence in the IDF, the chief of general staff in the IDF, those who manage the negotiation team from inside the IDF and outside. Not one official source has confirmed this claim. All of them said that as far as Israel is concerned, as far as we know, the official Israeli standpoint and what we understand from the intelligence, Hamas is willing to release all the hostages. So just concerning this, and regarding the
Well,
military pressure, look, we've tried this for a year and a half. We really tried this, and we didn't manage to achieve.
it's very different with Joe Biden in power, and also how disorganized Israel was after. But wait, so I just
But,
want to go on this.
no, but
They're not saying that they're sure. They're just not. They're not saying that they're not sure. Like, yeah, they could say, "Oh, there's a chance." So that way, we're going to keep going and string people
uh,
along. But
there's a chance that everything can happen tomorrow. But as far as as Israel is concerned, as far as the Israeli intelligence is concerned, Hamas will stand by what he said. He will release all the hostages if Israel agrees to the end of the war. So I think we can take this as a fact if we trust the IDF intelligence or the IDF as a general. And I think it's something it's hard to argue about this. I think when we
well,
meet
no,
with official
I
sources,
think
we need to believe them. Otherwise, what can be trusted?
I ask myself that every day because there's a lot of things where, for example, there's one hostage that I knew was alive 9 or 10 months ago. That, as far as I know, the family didn't know that for 8 or 9 months for whatever reason, whether it was how they acquired the information or they didn't or whatever's going on. So when you
How
say
do you
what can
know?
you
Do you
trust?
know?
Because I spoke to someone who's very close to that family, and they said, oh, they hadn't really heard anything, or maybe they weren't telling that whatever it was. It wasn't clear. I think that I know someone in the American side made phone calls and kind of was able to check, and that's how they were able to figure it out. But I guess things are very when you say in terms of who you trust and who you don't, it is a real issue. And I guess I think with the polarization of how everything's going, and there's another question I wanted to ask you: Do you think it's helpful to say those things about Bibi and the government publicly in that way? I know there's been a discussion about whether it's, I don't want to say inside the family, but we don't want to give fuel to Hamas or Al Jazeera, things like that. I know I watch Al Jazeera quite regularly, and when they open their segments about what's going on in Israel, they say in the first 90 seconds, even the Israelis hate this government and they don't like what he's doing. And look, the Israelis there also don't like Bibi. So it kind of gives fuel to them. Do you think it's the
Do,
way
are
that
you familiar
necessary?
with the name Ron
I am familiar with the name Ron. Yes.
and with Adar Goldin and Aaron Shaul and Avera Mengistu and Hisham Assad?
Yes.
All these are five people. Four of them were held captive. One is still held captive. Adar Goldin, they were held captive for about 10 years, ever since 2014. And their families were told, if you speak out loud, if you'll be outspoken, you're going to raise the prices. You're giving ammunition to Hamas. And they said quietly, for 10 years, they've been waiting quietly. And now, when the 7th of October happened, they told us we were frightened by the government, we were threatened, and we were bullied into being quiet, and it didn't work. And they know right now the body of Ron Shaul was retrieved with the military operation, and Hisham Assad and Avera Mengistu were returned as a part of the humanitarian part of the first hostage deal. And they know, and they are saying that if the 7th of October did not happen and was such a big protest movement inside Israel, their loved ones would have stayed in Gaza for many long years. The wife of Ron Arad, Tam Yarad, is a big supporter of our protest movement, saying that she was told by the government, which was another government, not the same government that there is right now, um, in contrast to Goldin and Ron Shaul, where the prime minister was still Netanyahu. But in Ron Arad's case, she was told, his wife, by the government, sit down, you shouldn't be outspoken, you're only going to endanger him and put him in risk. And she sat down. And for more than 30 years, um, she's been waiting, and his body is lost, and he's not going to return to Israel ever. And we decided that we're not willing to suffer such a fate, and we don't believe what we're told. And we know in September, after the killing of after the murdering and execution of the 6 hostages, which bodies were retrieved to Israel. We know that was a big there was an attempt to put forward an idea that the protests are strengthening Hamas and is only helping Hamas with the whole incident with the build, which they took classified documents, faked them, and posted them on foreign media, and then told the Israeli public, look, the protests are good for Hamas. We know this to be false. Again, we couldn't speak with any military or security official that could say to us with 100% that this is true. Most of them believe this to be false. There is no connection between the protest and Hamas regarding the negotiation. Of
Well,
course, Hamas is to divide
let me
us.
ask you that. Let me ask you this though specifically. There's a difference between being loud and challenging whether or not the prime minister or the government cares about your brother. So I
I
understand
believe
saying you can be loud, but what do you make of the argument people that say like, okay, well, challenging if someone actually has the best interest of your brother in mind might be a step too far.
I believe that Netanyahu had no. I think that from the start he didn't want to release all the hostages, and I believe that he's been doing whatever he can to not get a hostage deal. He's been manipulating and using the negotiation team and the Israeli public opinion and his hold on the media to postpone and collapse and torpedo whatever hostage deal he could get. And I think that's the reason that the hostage deal was achieved, not by coincidence, on the 20th of January, just when Trump was
Well,
getting
when
into
Trump comes in,
office.
okay.
Because of his threat, I think that Trump has threatened Netanyahu to get his hostage deal. And I think that's why he got the hostage deal. And we see that right now, Netanyahu has basically dismantled the negotiation team and put Ron Dermer as the head of the negotiation team. And I truly believe, and I think the majority of the hostage families believe so, that Netanyahu is doing whatever he can, everything in his power not to get the hostage deal. And because of this, we have to fight him. And what we've been doing in the past couple of months is fighting Netanyahu and his government personally, because we feel that if we are not going to win this, and by winning this I mean getting a hostage deal, the alternative is that they are going to win this, and by they I mean the government and Netanyahu. And if they win, no hostage deal is going to achieve, and we're simply going to end up with endless war inside Gaza for as long as possible, to prolong the war, to keep hold of his political power and his government.
So what's it like
And
living in a
basically,
country?
you can see, for example, that once the first hostage deal was signed, Ben Gvir and his party resigned the government, and now when the war resumed, he entered government again. So by resuming the war, Netanyahu has gained more political power, in contrary to stopping or ending the war. So you can simply see this as a fact right now in Israel.
So you don't even. What's that like when you've come to a conclusion living in a country, Jewish state Israel, that the prime minister, according to you, uh, is actively seeking to keep your brother kept hostage by a terrorist organization?
This is the absolutely worst thing that a citizen, a patriot citizen, in a country which I served and helped to protect. And I love my country, and to feel betrayed by the government and personally by the prime minister. I think it's the worst thing that we can feel. And this is why we're doing what we're doing, because I'm not willing to accept such a fate and accept such a reality. And I think my brother's life worth more than me sitting quietly. I think it's a war I'm simply not willing to, or not. There is no chance of me losing. It's simply not an option. We have to win this. Nimrod has to come home. And I think that in the past couple of weeks, I think the majority of Israelis are starting to sing this. I think you can look at the polls that are being published weekly, and the majority of the people of Israel want to end the war, want to see the second phase, including the end of the war, and see the hostages back in Israel. And you can simply see the tens of thousands of people on the streets with us every single week. I think, and this is actually what gives us strength to continue what we're doing by knowing there is a majority, 60-70% of Israelis are behind us. And it's really empowering for us. And we know that we're not alone. It's not us against the government. There are many people with us, helping and supporting us in this struggle or fight we're fighting.
So I'll just say this as someone who wasn't as involved in Israel stuff. I always cared, but wasn't as involved before. There was, it's not nice, God forbid, but after October 7th, and there was more unity and less the flame in terms of tone of the language. It's a lot different, and it's been a little bit jarring the last week. As an observer, just seeing some of what was said on a personal level, but I understand where coming with if I had your conclusions of how the situation was going, I would probably use the same language. So I think the understanding is extremely important.
And I think it took us a couple of months, about 6 months, to realize this. It wasn't the first conclusion we came to. And at first, we worked with the government, especially before and during the first hostage deal on November 2023. We had belief and we supported the government in their effort. But after a couple of months have passed, we came to the conclusion that this is the situation. We simply have to deal with this. And regarding this past week, I think these are really hard times to be an Israeli. Whatever political side
a
you're
Jewish
on,
person around the world.
yeah, I think to be a Jewish person around the world is always hard. But these are tough times in Israel, very hard times.
All right, before we close here, I want to ask you. I'm gonna give you a few different names, and if you just give me the first word that comes to your mind. I just came up with this as I was listening to you speak. I said, I'm curious how this will go. So, Yoav Galan,
Phony,
Ron Dermer,
puppet,
Joe Biden,
irrelevant,
Yichia Sinwar,
devil,
Steve Witkoff,
ally,
Itamar Ben-Gvir,
a danger,
Donald Trump,
unpredictable,
Benjamin Netanyahu.
an enemy.
All right, I'm not even gonna respond one on those. I just wanted to hear exactly where you came on that. I really appreciate taking the time, Yotam. I hope that the audience, first of all, continues to speak up about your brother and the hostages that are being held in Gaza. And I'll say that for those who have made it this far with us here, I don't necessarily agree with everything you said, but I am as much with you as anyone could possibly be. And I think that that's the feeling in general in terms of wanting to be there and support and try to get to a situation where your brother's home and the other hostages are home. And my hope is that everyone can continue to stay focused on it and work whatever channels they're working and be vocal about it, because like you said, there is no alternative. They have to come home, and doing whatever we can to try to be there emotionally and support however we can. So I really appreciate taking the time, and God willing, the next time you come on, it will be with your brother, and you'll have seen his tattoo in person, and
Amen.
it will be a good time. And I appreciate you again, your honesty and willingness to discuss the hard questions. I think it's important for people to understand perspective, and that way people can evaluate ideas on their merits. So I really appreciate it.
Sure, and thank you for the opportunity. I think it's always good to speak with someone, even if you don't agree with his opinion. I think it's in this time it's very hard to find someone to simply debate or speak with. Always come to arguments. And even though we're not agreeing on some things, the end goal is always the same. We all want the hostages back home. We all want Israel to be safe and the Jewish people to be safe. Simply don't agree on the way. Yeah, I think it's okay.
Exactly.
But thank you.
God willing, it will work out. It's just, I don't think there's ever going to be the same normal as before October 7th, but I look forward to the day where there's some degree of more normalcy, because this is crazy.
Thank you. Thank you very
So
much.